So I'm not going to cover a number of things. I'm not going to be spending any time teaching you how to write. I'm not going to be talking about spelling and grammar. I'm not going to be talking about verbs and adverbs and nouns. I'm not going to go into anything like that. I'm not going to tell you how to write a Canadian classic or a great novel, the great American novel. I am not going to tell you how to be the next Dickens, simply because I don't know how to do any of those things. If I knew how, I'd be off doing that instead of giving this presentation right now. Similarly, I'm not going to tell you how to write a bestseller. I'm not going to tell you how to outsell Stephen King or J.K. Rowling and how to write a book that will make you a millionaire. Most self-published authors will sell 250 books or fewer, so your expectation should be very modest traction rather than becoming a household name and finding fame and fortune. Very, very, very few authors find that. The median salary for full-time authors in, I think this was 2018 or something like that, was $20,300 US. And so writing isn't something that's a really easy way to find kind of money and get your name out there and fame, and it's just not a good way to become rich and famous. And so if that's sort of your goal, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that to have in the back of your mind. But I think that people who have hoped to get that by writing have often been disappointed. I have an uncle who about 20 or 30 years ago, he wrote a novel, and his idea writing the novel was that that was going to be, he called it a, a perpetual money machine. And so his idea was that the novel would just create royalties for him month after month, year after year, and he'd do the work once and then it would just endlessly make money for him. Nowadays, people would probably call something like that like passive income. That he thought the he could write a novel and be passive income. And for the vast majority of people, if they considered the number of hours they spent on their writing and on their books, they're making far, far, far less than minimum wage. So if it's a quick way to kind of try to make some money, writing fiction definitely isn't the way to go. There's a woman, Diane Dewan, and I actually, when I was in high school, I've read a couple of her books. She did a series, So You Want to Be a Wizard or something like that. And they were kind of YA books about this girl finding a book that taught her how to become a wizard and cast spells and things like that. And she's worked for decades. She's done a lot of genre fiction, putting out books like Star Wars books and Star Trek books, and then some of her own, like this How to Be a Wizard series. And she's been published by the big presses, the main large publishers, and she was in bookstores. I got her book from Allison the Bookman, a used bookstore here in North Bay. So she was a reasonably well established writer. And about a year or two ago, she was on social media saying that her and her writer husband were way, way, way behind in rent, and they were going to get evicted from their landlord. And they were begging people to buy books from their back catalog so they could get caught up on rent. And so lots of people bought their books primarily to help them out and get them caught up on their rent. So even after her having a pretty solid career, she's kind of put out a lot of books and worked with publishers. And from the outside, it looked like a very successful career. Financially, it seemed like she was quite unstable. Sharon Shin is another author that I've read a number of her books, and I like them. And she's been professionally published. She's you used to see her books in Coles at the Northgate Square at the mall here in North Bay. I think her books are probably still there if you go and look at them. And she works in insurance or something. She has a day job in insurance in St. Louis, and she writes all of her books evenings and weekends. And so it's just like this side hustle for her, in spite of, again, having a decade-long career where she's getting books published. And by all indications, she seems to be quite successful as a writer, but that doesn't even translate to a full-time income that's sustainable for either of these women. The thing I will say, as much as that might be a downer, is that I really believe that anybody who is enthusiastic enough about role playing to come to a convention or to watch a video about writing advice targeting role players has the interest and skill to write a book. And so I believe that you could do that. And there's this Twitter idea on the side here that somebody says, I want to write a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but just play it myself and DM myself. And then they say, I've been informed that this is called writing a book. And this really is true, I believe. I feel like role playing is collaborative storytelling. It's a group of maybe 6 people coming together to try to tell a story together. And the time you spent role playing has really been building your storytelling muscles. And I think this will translate to writing a book, and that it's something that each of you can do and that you would enjoy, and that I feel like you could see through to completion. Um, Big readers. I feel anybody who likes to read a lot, they often hit the point where they then want to write a book. And I feel like anyone who's read a ton probably has internalized story structure and how you put together a book to the point that they would be able to write a book. So if somebody was a big reader and they said, I'm thinking about writing a book, I don't know if I can do it or not, I'd probably say to them, I think you can. If you read a lot of books, I think that you can write a book. I think that passionate role players have developed all of the skills to write a book. I think that the people running the games have even built up the skills to create a novel setting and do world building and have a fantasy or a sci-fi or horror world that would be quite a rich world with its own rules and whatnot. I think that most of you, if you start trying to write fiction, you'll find that it's just another form of storytelling, and it'll feel quite familiar to you. Scott Adams is the cartoonist who does the Dilbert cartoon that you may have read. It's kind of like workplace humor. And he was becoming a cartoonist while he still worked in Pacific Bell down in San Francisco. He was kind of working this corporate job, and that gave him some of the material for the Dilbert comic strip. And he became a cartoonist and was in the newspapers, and he'd written some books. I think it was mostly collections of his comic strips while he continued to work there and was at this corporation. And he found that a lot of his coworkers, a surprising number of his coworkers, went on to write books and become authors. And his interpretation of this is that these people saw him and said, well, if that guy can get a comic strip in a bunch of newspapers and can get books published, why can't I? And I think that that's a really good view of it, that if you're hearing me talk and if your reaction is, if this guy can write 8 books, why can't I write at least one book? That's the right reaction to that. A lot more people can write a book than do write a book. And so it's something that far more people are capable of than people actually try and go through the process and do it. And so I really believe everybody in this room has the capability to do this, and that it probably isn't as hard as you assume it's going to be.